Hey, good evening, everyone. It's Patrick over at Plumas Charter, and just wanted to send out a brief here with just some learning tips and strategies that might help you in the home. This is a condensed down version of a 30-minute webinar that was provided by our special education local plan area, which is facilitated through the El Dorado County Office of Education. And this is good for any student. It's not necessarily directly related to special ed. And it just kind of shares some tips and strategies for learning in the home. So this original brief was geared for homework, and we're just going to kind of replace homework with distance learning. Some aspects of homework have become somewhat, sort of controversial, I guess, in the last like 5 to 10 years in education in terms of the value. But at a minimum, we can say that, these learning, practical applications that your son or daughter does at home can reinforce some of the following. It's just being, task-oriented, being able to work independently, develop their own habits for how they work through the processes related to school, and of course, just basic time management and problem solving. So this learning routine is really a 4-step process. It's kind of like really 3.5, but and we'll get into that in a second. But the key point here is that it's a routine. And, the truth is that here in school, any sort of like classroom management or school management, it's all built around routine, right? And that is what, when you think about, on a regular day pre-COVID, 24 students in one classroom for 5, 6, 7 hours a day, the best way to get through it is just by keeping things the same, right? It's not to say that there's not flexibility, but having that routine with how students function day to day is really the best way to kind of manage things. So we'll go into each one of these steps in detail here in a second. So the first step is really finding that location in the home that works best for you. The location may or may not be in your child's bedroom. Sometimes that can be kind of distracting because, some kids like to, sort of hibernate in their rooms, maybe play video games or just hang out. So maybe that is not the best environment. If it is, hey, that's great. But it's really about maximizing that space that's going to be the most effective. And, whether or not that's close to you during your normal schedule throughout the day, so that you can provide assistance or not. It all depends on what your child is doing. So one thing to think about is where the learning materials are and if they're accessible. So if that's a place where some of those things, not to say that they don't get put away at the end of each day, but at least that they can be accessed. I know when we were doing full distance learning in the spring with my own family, one of the things that helped us was having just a cardboard box for each one of our kids to put their books, folders, pens, pencils, rulers, all that stuff, just in one central location, so that when it was time to learn for the day, we weren't wasting 10, 15 minutes trying to track all that stuff down throughout the house. And that kind of speaks to the next point, is having like a learning center. So, thinking about, as an adult, we may have our own space in the house as like an office or like a little area where we have our computer and our files set up. A lot of these same aspects can help our students. So maybe this is a semi-permanent place where the learning materials can be kept, again, in an accessible bin box or maybe like a milk crate, something like that. One suggestion is like having a trifold setup. If you think about those poster boards that some students use for like a science project, right? You can repurpose that and hang organizing files on it, maybe a schedule and a clock or a timer. Some kids work real well with, if you give them their assignment and it's, okay, here's the timer, you got 20 minutes to do these 5 math problems, for example. That can be very helpful for some students. So we'll see a picture of that here in a second. So over here on the left, you can see that trifold setup. It looks like this is probably at like the kitchen table or something like that. And up here, there's a small, sort of kitchen timer where, maybe this student works really well with that. And then on the outside here, maybe this is a place to put completed work. And then it's all organized, ready to go for when you have to turn it in. Selecting a designated time. So we're going to talk about time. And this is kind of like that step 3 into 4. It's kind of like a combined step here, is that, having a good time throughout the day. So, some kids just work great in the mornings, right? They have breakfast and then they get right off, right into their schoolwork, and it's no issue. Some other kids, it just doesn't work that way. Maybe the afternoon's a better time. And of course, all this is dependent on everything that, the adults are doing in their lives. So, if you're working, or if you have a daycare provider or a family friend helping out, you have to take all that into consideration. But you're just trying to find that right time of the day when this can be helpful for your child. And then from that right time of the day, then we break things down into a more detailed schedule. So that's exactly what, we would do here on site, is that having a schedule really helps. It's got, you got the beginning, middle, end of a subject period, so that way it creates, just inherent goals for that student as they're working through. They know they only have, 30 minutes to do a reading and writing sample, or maybe to get these, 3 or 4 math pages done. It's going to be 45 minutes. And it just helps provide structure and routine. So here are a couple examples of that schedule. These are obviously for younger students. Over here, maybe, if your son or daughter hasn't, learned to read yet, or they're still struggling, you can use pictures. This looks like a little Velcro chart over here. Whereas over here on the right, we have sort of these flap charts that as the task is completed, the flap goes down, and that can really help with motivating, your child to kind of see all the work that they've done throughout the day. On this example, we have kind of a standard planner over here on the left, and this might work for older students. And then over here on the right, some electronic examples. This can be very helpful when you're trying to coordinate a schedule across multiple people. So back to that example of like a daycare provider, maybe a family friend that might be tutoring or helping out with some of the schoolwork. This is a way to coordinate all those efforts. So a few more things is make sure you factor in some breaks and some choice in there for your child. The breaks are fairly obvious, but if they can help pick and choose when they like to do certain things throughout the day, that can provide some benefit. And of course, in the video, and I've shared a link for the video down here, and like I said, it's about 30 minutes long. It's pretty dry, but if you think it might help you, by all means, check it out. It's not to say that it's not helpful, but it does kind of drag on a little bit. So one of the things that the moderator talks about are incentives and bribes. And the incentives are things that are planned, and these are things that maybe after the course of a week, it's like an extra 30 minutes playing video games or mountain biking with friends or whatever the case may be. Whereas like an unplanned event might be like a bribe, sort of like, hey, if you get all your math done, you'll get ice cream sundaes all night. And that may reinforce negative behavior. If you have any questions or comments or feedback, my email address is down there at the bottom, as well as my phone number and my extension. And, lastly, everybody's doing a great job, right? This is obviously a challenging experience, and it is important to recognize, we see it here every day, that things are shaping up positively. And it may not feel like that all the time, but when things do go awry or it is difficult, it's just important to kind of center back, focus on why that's happening, and then we can learn from it and we can just keep going. So please feel free to contact me at any time if you have any questions or you need some additional assistance. And thanks a lot and have a great weekend.